Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So previously I made a video on how to make the bust cups with the cut and sew bra foam. This is the video I made, and people been asking if there's another material to make the bust cups. The answer is yes, and I got you. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you 4 ways to make the bust cups with fusible fleece. You ready? Let's get into this. So fusible fleece is made by different companies. I like to use this company. With this brand, it has 2 different types. It has 987F and 971F. This is the low loaf and this is the high loaf, which is the plus. You will notice the low loaf is very thin. And with the high loaf, you're going to see it has a little bit more weight. I use both, depending on how I want to design the cups. Now let's get into method 1. For method 1, there's no seam allowance around the fusible fleece foam. And for the main fabric, there's no seam allowance here, here, or here. Next, cut the main fabric pieces and turn the pieces around. Write a 1/2 inch seam allowance only in these areas. Here are the fabric pieces I'm going to use in method 1. In this method, I will be using 3 layers of the thin fusible fleece. You can use 3 or 4 layers of 987F. 5 layers is too thick. So for the first layer, put the glue side up. For the second one, put the glue side up. And for the last one, put the glue side down. Then put a cloth on top and press all around till all the pieces are glued together. This is how the 3 layers will look. Next, put the pattern pieces on top and cut the fusible fleece. This is called fusible bonding web. Cut a piece and put it on top like this. Then put the fusible fleece on top and press it till it's glued together. After that, sew the pieces with a zigzag stitch like this. Here is how the front looks, and this is the inside of the cup. The next step is to cover the zigzag stitch on the front of the cup. Put some bias tape and sew it like this. Next, put your lining on top of the cup right side to right side and sew on the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then turn it over and sew an understitch. This is how it's going to look. The next step is to put your lining on top of the main fabric right side to right side and sew on the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then turn it over and sew an understitch. For the boning, you can put it here or make a 3/8 stitch here and here. Or you can put it in the back like how I did it. It's all up to you. I made a video on 9 ways to sew the boning. If you haven't seen it yet, I will leave the link in the description below. Next, take your cup and sew it a 1/2 inch all around. When you're sewing, make sure the fabric is not bunching up underneath. Let's sew. After you sew the cup, always curve the bias tape. The curve will ease the tightness on the front cup. Then put the bias tape on the 1/2 inch seam allowance and sew 1/8 away from the bias tape like this. From there, check under the cup to see if there's any puckers or any fabric bunching up. Once it looks good, then cut off 1/4 or just a little bit more right here. But be careful, don't cut all of it off, okay guys? After that, you can put a basting stitch at the end of the underwire channel so you can see where it ends when you're sewing. Sew 1/4 away from this edge right here. Let's sew. Slow down when you get to the seam right here so you can sew through the bulkiness. Take your time so that the needle can sew through the underwire. Try to flatten the underwire, then sew. Next is the underwire. The short side goes in the front and the long side goes in the back. Once you put it in, it will look like this. The stitch in the back doesn't have to be perfect because of the layers it has, but the stitch definitely has to be neat in the front. Now before we get into method 2, I want to show you something. Here we have 2 cups. These cups have 2 layers of fusible fleece. Never sew the fusible fleece with seam allowance. It doesn't look right. Let me show you what it looks like. The cup is bulky right here. The seams are supposed to lay flat and smooth. It just makes the cup look too homemade. Now, what if I cut the fusible fleece off after I sew it with the seam allowance? Well, it's still going to look bulky, as you can see. And that's because I still sewed it to the seam allowance. Also, I would not put 2 layers of fusible fleece around the cup seam allowance. But there's one exception for the fusible fleece that can work, and it's only for that area. You see this right here? This is too thick to sew. The fusible fleece material is rough. We need something to make it a little bit more fluffier so it can sew smoothly through the sewing machine. Let me show you a better way to sew it. You're definitely going to like this method. You ready? Let's go. So for method 2, we will use 3/8 and 3/8 for the top of the fabric only. Then we're going to put a 1/2 inch all around the cup. For the foam and lining, there'll be no seam allowance on the top. Put seam allowance here, 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 and here only. These are the pieces we're going to use. We need 2 pieces of the polyester batting. If it's thick like mine's, then just split it in 2 like this. We also need 3 pieces of the fusible bonding web, 1 piece of the fusible fleece, and a piece of fabric for the lining. The first step is to lay the fusible fleece glue side up. Next, put 1 layer of the fusible bonding web. Then put 1 layer of the polyester batting. After that, put a cloth on top and press all around till it's all flat and glued together. Once that's done, we're going to turn it over to the other side and put 1 layer of the fusible bonding web, 1 layer of the polyester batting, then 1 layer of the fusible bonding web, and after that, put the lining on top, right side up. Put a cloth on top and press all around till it's all flat and glued together. This is how it's going to look. As you can see, the fusible fleece is inside of the cushion. Next, cut the pattern pieces and sew the pieces together with a zigzag stitch. This is the back of the cup and the inside. After that, cover the zigzag stitch with the bias tape. Then put the main fabric on the cup like this and sew a 3/8 inch stitch. After that, flip it over and sew an understitch. This is how the cup is going to look. Next up, put the lining and main fabric right side to right side and sew a 1/2 inch on the top of the bustier. Then turn the lining over and sew an understitch. A understitch is used to stop the lining from showing in the front. So you can stitch the seam allowance to the lining like this. Then sew a basting stitch to keep the 2 fabrics together. Next, sew your cup a 1/2 inch all around. Let's sew. Always make sure the fabrics are not bunched up underneath. This part right here is optional. If the cup has a lot of layers, I would sew on the 3 pieces again at the 1/2 inch seam allowance and then unstitch the 3 little pieces on both sides before the 1/2 inch seam allowance so I can cut it off before I cut the foam off. It helps a little bit with the bulkiness. Then put your curved underwire channel on the 1/2 inch seam allowance. After that, sew 1/8 away from the edge of the underwire channel. Let's sew. Cut the 3 little pieces close to the end, then cut the foam off like this. After that, sew a 1/4 stitch away from the cup edge. Let's sew. This is how the front and back is going to look. Then take your underwire and put the short side in the front and the long side in the back. Once you put it in, the cup will form its shape. Next is method 3. In this method, I will show you the difference between fabrics and how it behaves against fusible fleece. This fabric is called brocade and it's very expensive. It's like $40–50 a yard and sometimes even more. As you can see, it frays very fast as soon as you cut it. For this material, you will need a serger to stop the fraying. But for this situation, we are making a structured bustier. Did you know that the interfacing can slow down the fraying? It doesn't stop it, but it slows it down just a little. So what I like to do is put light interfacing on the whole fabric and then put the pattern pieces on top and cut the pieces out. From there, I like to serge it after I sew the bust cut pieces together. As for the lining, I had 2 fabrics that matched the brocade fabric, so I chose the satin. As you know, cotton and satin frays too, but it doesn't fray as fast as the brocade, so you don't have to put light interfacing to slow the fraying down. That's up to you, but I like to make sure it doesn't since the 3 pieces of the bust cup is very small. One of the light interfacing I use is Pellin SF 101, but I also use Bozo Style 300. They are both light interfacing, but Bozo feels a little lighter than Pellin. I'm not sure if you can see my hand through the interfacing, but Bozo is lighter. For method 3, I will use 3 pieces of 987F. Put the glue side up for the first layer, glue side up for the second layer, and glue side down for the third. Then press it all around till it's all glued together. After that, cut out your lining and fusible fleece pieces out. Next, put a piece of the fusible bonding web on top. After that, put the fusible fleece. Then put a cloth and press it till it's glued together. From there, we're going to sew a zigzag stitch. Let's sew. This is how the inside of the lining is going to look. Here is a quick lesson on Fabrics 101. Always test your fabric's behavior. As you can see, in method 1, I put fusible fleece in the back of the main fabric, and I'm using cotton. For method 3, I put fusible fleece on the inside of the lining, and I'm using satin. You're going to notice that there's wrinkles right over here, and that's okay. That's what fusible fleece does. It acts different from the cut and sew bra foam. If I turn it over and I use it for the front of the cup, like in method 1, you're going to notice there's still wrinkles. So I suggest that you never use fusible fleece with satin for method 1. But if you want to use satin, make sure it's only for the inside of the lining like in method 3. Also, satin and fusible fleece will work better together in method 4. Let's continue. So next, put your lining on top right side to right side and sew a 1/2 inch. Then flip it over and sew an understitch. Here is the back and the front. Repeat the process for the lining. Then sew the cup a 1/2 inch. After you sew it, make sure everything looks good under the cup. You can also clip around the lining part to ease the tension under the cup. Then sew the underwire channel, and this is how the bustier will look for method 3. Brocade is one of my favorite fabrics. I'm in love with brocade. What's your favorite fabrics? Let me know in the comments. Alright guys, next up is method 4. So in method 4, we're going to put a 1/2 inch all around the fabric and lining. And for the fusible fleece, there'll be no seam allowance anywhere. These are the fabric pieces I'll be using. For this method, I will be using 4 pieces of the 971F, the thick one. But you can use the thin one too. Just put 4 pieces together of the 987F or whatever brand you're using, it's fine. So for the first layer, put the glue side up. The second layer, put the glue side up. The third layer, put the glue side up. And the last layer, put the glue side down. Then put a cloth on top and press all around until all 4 layers are glued together. From there, cut your pieces and sew a zigzag stitch. Let's sew. Next, write a 1/2 inch seam allowance on top. Then clip all the way around the cup. After that, put some fusible bonding web on top of the fusible fleece. Then put it inside the cup like this. Make sure it does not go over the 1/2 inch seam allowance on top. I like to put pins so it doesn't move when I'm pressing on the front of the cup. Then clip around the bottom of the cup and put the lining on top right side to right side and sew a 1/2 inch on top. After that, flip it over and sew an understitch. This is how it's going to look. So I made a video on how to make bust cups with a cut and sew bra foam, and then I made this video with fusible fleece. But did you know that there's another material that can make bust cups? If you would like me to make a video, let me know in the comments. Please give this video a like and share it so it can help other creators who want to learn how to make bust cups. Here is a playlist on how to make different types of cups. Go ahead and click on that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to practice, practice, practice. Bye, everybody.